How's it going, everyone? It's Holly from West 1000. Today is June 1st, 2020, and today is officially the start of the hurricane season. But obviously, we already had two named storms before the official start, so we've already been experiencing hurricane season even before it officially started today, and we could potentially see another tropical cyclone form with Tropical Depression 3 that's just formed earlier today. But before I begin my forecast, my analysis, make sure to subscribe. If you like weather videos, weather related videos, make sure to like if you like this content, and make sure to share with friends and family who are interested. But let's look at Tropical Depression 3. So it's currently a 30-mile-per-hour storm, so it's still very weak, barely a tropical depression, and it has a minimum central pressure of 1,005 millibars, which is interesting because in the latest update, the 7 o'clock Central Daylight Time update, the central millibar pressure actually went lower, which means that this storm is indeed strengthening and has been strengthening over the past couple of hours. And despite the stronger wind shear it's currently experiencing as of right now, I do expect this to strengthen to maybe a tropical storm before it makes landfall and then dissipates again. And then, but this storm will not be over once it makes second landfall, in Mexico, because it could redevelop into the Gulf and then impact some of the Gulf states. So let's currently look at the current satellite imagery, and you can see that based off of this, it doesn't look that organized. You could see that there isn't really a central area of rotation. There isn't really an area where all thunderstorms are clustered together, as we're seeing mainly scattered thunderstorms and rain showers throughout this storm. And I would say the center of circulation is currently around right here, and you can see that it's relatively dry, so it doesn't really look that organized. However, we do see thunderstorms developing just outside of the center of circulation, especially towards the eastern side on the Yucatan Peninsula, where we see those blow-ups of thunderstorms just developing right over the Yucatan Peninsula. And we do have a broad area of thunderstorms as well, just to the north and east of the center of circulation. We also have thunderstorms developing more towards Guatemala, and but for the most part, the western portion of the storm is rather dry, and that's as a result of this wind shear that this storm has been dealing with, as we're seeing those upper level winds move from the west to the east, sort of like the westerlies. And we have to keep in mind that it's still June, it's still very early in the hurricane season, so it's not uncommon to see strong upper level winds this far south in the Atlantic, since it takes a while for the instability to go away this far south in the Atlantic. It's not until August and September, once the sea surface temperatures warm up, we start to see less and less instability that would otherwise induce those upper level winds. So yeah, this currently Tropical Depression 3 is experiencing some wind shear, which is why we're seeing those thunderstorms drift to the north and east as of right now. And then if we look at the current, and I'll show you why, if we look at the current water vapor imagery, there's Tropical Depression E, and you can see those thunderstorm bands are pretty much circulating towards the east, and it's as a result of this extratropical cyclone that's currently in the middle of the Atlantic as of right now, just to the east of Bermuda, and alongside of it, on the back side of it, we're seeing quite a bit of instability, like inducing those upper level winds and creating strong upper level winds over Tropical Depression 3, which is why it may struggle to develop a little bit. However, I don't think this wind shear will be enough to really prevent it from strengthening in the near future. I'm talking like 1 to 2 days out. And I expect this wind shear to die down as this ridge that's currently, I think, over Oklahoma or the Midwest. I could be wrong about that. But it's gonna move more and more towards the east, and it'll sort of push away this extratropical cyclone that's currently putting a lot of upper level winds over this storm. And as a result, I do expect this to strengthen before it makes a second landfall on the Mexico coast, as tropical storm warnings are issued in that area. However, once that ridge moves over to the east, this storm is going to move very slowly as a result, because there's going to be very weak steering currents, as there's going to be a lot of steering currents that will pretty much conflict with each other and pretty much make the storm stay stationary for a couple of days. So to put in perspective the upper level winds this storm is currently experiencing, you can see that although the jet stream is well up to the north, I would say it's right around here where I'm outlining it. You see those upper level winds go all the way south during the month of June, as there's still a lot of instability during the early months of summer in the south, and those upper level winds are continuing to hinder it from developing as of right now. However, I expect that to weaken once this ridge starts to dominate over the southeast later during its life. And then this wind shear map also clearly identifies this wind shear, those upper level winds currently affecting it, which is why this storm is struggling to develop a little bit. However, the reason why I do expect this storm to eventually develop in the near future is because those water temperatures, especially in the extreme southern portion of the Gulf of Mexico along the Gulf Coast, are much warmer than average for this time of the year. And alongside with this extratropical cyclone that's going to move more towards the east, and with I expect this maybe develop into a tropical storm before it makes a second landfall and dissipates on the Mexico coast and pretty much lingers over the same area. So, and if it does that, I believe, it will be the quickest time the Atlantic hurricane season experienced 3 named storms ever. Like the second quickest was June 5th, where we've experienced 3 named tropical cyclones, which was in 2016. And this would break the record if it develops before June 5th, where we've had 3 tropical cyclones form in the Atlantic. And that sort of gives you the idea that there's going to be a long and active and intense hurricane season, and that's definitely not good news for pretty much anyone within the threat of Atlantic hurricanes this year. But then here's the track of this. So the National Hurricane Center also expects this to develop in the tropical storm, because like I said, I expect the wind shear to die down, and I expect it to be over, and it's going to be over warmer than water. It's warmer than average sea surface temperatures. That will pretty much strengthen this storm, and might make landfall along the Mexico coast. So and that's not good news. And you can see that it's gonna move extremely slowly. Like today is Monday, and then by the Thursday time frame, it's still gonna be like mostly in the same area, maybe like a 40 mile distance away from where it's currently at and where it will be in Thursday. So that's a huge worry from Mexico, as I would expect life-threatening flash flooding in those areas, to be honest, as we're just gonna see a lot of rain just over the Mexico area and the Yucatan Peninsula. So if you're in very flood-prone areas towards the southern portion of Mexico, and even Guatemala, El Salvador, Belize, you might get, if you're affected by floods, you definitely need to be prepared for that, as flooding is certainly likely with this, since it's going to be over the same area for days. So keep in mind that we have already seen flooding in El Salvador and Guatemala thanks to the landfall of Tropical Storm Amanda, but definitely expect more flooding in those same areas, and I wish you guys the best in those areas and to prepare the best you can. And then after it lingers over the just off the coast of Mexico, or maybe over Mexico, it begins to move north by the Friday to Saturday time frame, and then it starts to accelerate as well as about 1 p.m. on Saturday. It's over the Gulf of Mexico, moving towards the north. So at this point, what the National Hurricane Center is expecting is a 60 mile per hour. While it doesn't say, it's expecting this Tropical Depression 3, which will likely be Tropical Storm Cristobal by this point, as 60 mile per hour tropical storm, which is borderline hurricane strength, and that's definitely worrying if you're along the Gulf Coast, and it's especially worrying that this is turning north, because once it turns north, it's really hard for this to miss land if you think about it, because this disturbance, if this moves north, which is getting more and more likely, it has to make landfall somewhere. Like, the only way it could avoid land is if it somehow goes just south of Florida and north of Cuba, between this area, and then just moves out to sea. But those chances are very slim, because there's just so much land that it's really hard to miss a landfall once it turns up north to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's definitely worrying. And then I know that your questions probably are, who's this gonna exactly impact, and which Gulf states should be on high alert, and how strong this will be. And at this point, it's honestly very hard to tell, as I can't give you a definitive answer, because again, we're talking about 6 to 8 days out to when this could potentially make landfall along Gulf states. So there's still a lot of uncertainty where this will exactly go and how strong it will be. However, if we take a look at the computer model, the reliable computer models assembly, the European model, and the GFS, it does give us somewhat of a better idea of how strong this will be and where exactly this will go. However, still take this with a big grain of salt, since these models again are predicting 6 to 8 days out, which gets very uncertain. But if we take a look at the European model, you can see most of the models pretty much linger over the southern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, and then as it turns north, the European is really leaning on strengthening this, and you see a lot of oranges and reds, and if you convert knots to miles per hour, that's like, I would say 60 and above is hurricane strength. So the European definitely wants to strengthen this into maybe a hurricane as we move, as it turns up north. And that's worrying us for Louisiana and Texas, because you definitely don't want to see a hurricane, especially during a current pandemic. So, and also it's been very wetter than average in these regions. So to add a potential hurricane or tropical storm definitely won't be very good news for those areas. And then if we take a look at the GFS, it's also lingering over the same area over Mexico, but it's taking a much weaker storm, which, to be honest, at this point, I'm starting to doubt a little bit, because I'm not sure it's gonna stay this week as it turns up north, because I think there won't be too much instability or upper level winds to really hinder this over the next several days. However, it's still 6 to 8 days out, and I don't want to disclude any possibilities, especially when we're talking about that far out. So maybe this could be correct. However, based on history, the European model is usually the more correct one, because I remember during Hurricane Sandy, with it like 8 days out, the European model pretty much nailed exactly where Hurricane Sandy was going to make landfall, while it took the GFS, I think, only about 4 days out or 3 days out before it really got a good idea of where the Hurricane Sandy will make landfall. So historically speaking, the European has been the more reliable model, and it's currently taking and it's currently leaning towards bringing potentially a hurricane, category 1 hurricane, along the Texas and Louisiana coast. However, 8 days out, it still gets uncertain. But if we take a look at exactly what the European model is saying, so if as we go 2 days out, it strengthened this to a tropical storm before it makes landfall on the Mexico coast, which would make it the earliest, again, the earliest we've seen 3 tropical cyclones form in the Atlantic hurricane season. And then it takes it up north and then again strengthens it and then takes a sharp turn west. And this is going about is 7 days out, so a week out it takes a landfall. I would say a tropical storm, 999 millibars to the Texas coast. And then if we take a look at the GFS, if we move, let me go back to current time, and then the GFS strengthens it, and then it redevelops a new storm, and then it strengthens it quite a bit, and then it's taking a landfall to Louisiana, it seems like, as a strong tropical storm. So I do expect that these current assembly models from the GFS will change. I believe we'll see a stronger storm because the Europeans definitely been leaning towards that direction, and currently Tropical Tidbits is leaning towards the direction. The GFS model on Tropical Tidbits is currently leaning towards a stronger tropical storm making landfall. So I do expect those assembly models to change. However, you may be asking what could potentially change this track, what could potentially change the trajectory of this storm, and what will change like the strength forecast. So if we move forward like this as of today, that extratropical cyclone like I was talking about moves towards the east, this high pressure dominates, and then we see lower pressures start to dominate, and then another ridge builds. And so the question is, how fast will that ridge move? Because if it moves a little slower, then it's probably more likely we'll see a landfall towards maybe Texas and the more western portion of the Gulf Coast. But if it moves more rapidly, I would say the Gulf Coast, like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and maybe even Florida might get involved. So we definitely need to check this ridge out for the next several days, because it's going to be key to where this storm goes. And yeah, that's about it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you like this content, and I hope you guys have a good night, good day, or good afternoon whenever you're watching this.